All right, we are recording now. All right. Thank you for listening to the Strong Calm podcast. My name is Aaron Dunn, and this podcast is for helping you strengthen your calm. COM. That is the root word for together or in common. And we use that root word for the 3 C's. That's communication, community building, so you can build your company, whether that's the company that you're building, the business that you're building, or the company that you keep, a personal brand, whatever it is. And my job is to help you do that and connect you to other people who can help you do that. And I'm really, really excited about this guest today. His name is Blaise Foret. Blaise is an author, speaker, entrepreneur, #1 Amazon best-selling author, a preacher, political commentator, and agency manager of Foret Financial, proud partner of the Lizard Group. Blaise, what's up, man?
It's a lot of things, man. It's a lot of things. I don't know. Did I just make all that up? Jeez.
Maybe. I don't know. Are you a Russian bot? Who knows?
Yes, that's exactly right. I forgot to put that in there. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Aaron. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So do you have any other, skills, things that you want to add to that?
Dude, husband. I don't know if that's a skill. I'm working on that, trying to do my best to do that. We can get that from my wife, find out how well I do at that. And then a father of a 2-year-old who we have a handful with her, man. She's a lot of fun though. But those are the other 2 main things that I do in life. So.
Excellent. Well, I want to jump right into it. So that gives like a 10,000 foot overview about like who you are and what you do. But if we could bring it down a little bit more to a granular level on like what you do every day, because I think there's a lot of people out there today that they have their work, they have their 8 to 5 work or 9 to 6 or whatever it is, and then there's this extra layer, this hobby, this hustle that happens on the weekend. And you are unique in that you've kind of fused them both together in a way, at least from the outside looking in. So if you could just kind of give me a little bit more context in your career path, maybe in the last like 5 years, what that's looked like, just so people can get a little bit more clarity on what your ongoing work is and what you're passionate about doing.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. So, the last 5 to 7 years would be a good overview, probably in a short snippet. But, you and I I don't know if we even met, but I know when we talked last night, you told me that you showed up at the Generation North meeting that I did in 2013 when I was preaching at that event. At that time, I think I was 30 years old. I had just launched out on my speaking career as far as independently. Before that, I had worked at a couple ministries and had opportunities to speak and preach through those ministries and had, my positions there. But launching out in 2013 was a big deal for me, separating from a larger ministry and going out on my own. And I wrote a book and did a speaking tour and everything. I worked with a buddy of mine and we put the whole thing together. It was like, we spoke all over the country for a 25 to 30-day period, traveled all over the country doing a book tour. And that was a big deal, and I always think back to that. It was definitely ministry, but it's very entrepreneurial when you step out like that on your own. You're stepping out onto the water, and that was a pretty awesome opportunity for me over that year doing that. I met my wife toward the end of that year, and we got engaged, we got married, and actually met her on eHarmony. That's how we met. So we got engaged, we got married, and then she's both of us are very free spirited and entrepreneurial types, and so we just don't like the 9 to 5 thing. She at the time was a professional photographer, and I was traveling and speaking. We just kind of looked at our lives and like, okay, how are we going to blend this? How do we start anew and afresh as one and kind of figure out our directions here? And the truth is, I didn't want to be gone all the time, to make the kind of money I would need to make, at least at that time in my current mindset at that time, in order to provide for a family. I would need to be gone a lot. And I don't know, that I think you just got to follow your heart and your passions, because for years, I had just been preaching for 10, 15 years. I mean, I started preaching in high school. And then once I got out of high school, I got into ministry school. I was preaching for years. But I just felt like a pullback on that, and just to focus on my marriage and to focus on this new opportunity I had in front of me with my marriage. And at the same time, I was going through probably some, like, this is another topic, but going through some kind of a theological transformation at the time as well. And when you're going through that, sometimes you don't want to talk. You don't want to stand up in front of everybody and talk, and be like, well, I don't know what to tell you guys about what I think about this or that right now. I kind of want to take this internal for a few years and see what happens. But so that all that conglomeration happening at the same time in 2014, 2015 led me, Aaron, to doing, oftentimes when we find ourselves in a rut, we revert to what we know is comfortable. I found myself working behind a coffee bar as a barista again at 31, 32 years old, which was the last job I had at age 18, before I got into ministry. And so I was pulling shots, running coffee, and that was it was a lot of fun, but it was really hard, because you definitely don't make money, and it's definitely tough to just grind that out, literally, and figure out how to provide for a family. I was doing a couple things, other things on the side, always hustling, doing some social. I ran a couple social media accounts for some local artists and different things. Just made me pennies, but it helped us get by. And at the same time, my wife started a business. So we were doing a lot. We had our hands on a lot of things at the time. All of that led to probably about a year later, just hitting this point going, okay, I'm not ready to jump back in full-time ministry yet. I don't feel that leading in my heart. I don't even know what the heck I'm doing with my life. I'm just going to put my resume out there and see if I can, just find a freaking job that'll pay the bills, And I got hit up by a car dealership, which was the dream for me, But I went in, I got the job, and I figured out I could sell. I figured out I could do well selling, because selling at the end of the day, it's just about connecting with people and caring about people. And, obviously you want to be selling something you believe in, but, I just connected with these people, and I worked there for 3 months, became one of the top salespeople, and got recruited out of there pretty quickly. This was late 2016, into the insurance industry, into a niche market of the life insurance industry called mortgage protection. And, we basically broker with 9 different insurance carriers. We work on a lead system, and we're able to, go out and protect families and help them get their house covered, their mortgage payment covered with an insurance product in the case of a death or a disability, and it pays off their home for them. So it was interesting when I made that transition, and I found myself sitting in homes, selling to these people. It was so much more natural to me, because I could sit there, and it wasn't about a sale. Literally, we're consultants. We got 85 products. It's not like a pitch and close type of thing. I could sit there, talk to them, say, all right, you folks filled out our form. You were interested. I'm here to help you. And we sit down and talk to them. And I'd sit there for an hour, hour and a half, and help people find out what's important to them, find out what they care about, and make a really solid connection. And then just find out what they needed and fill that need with one of the insurance products that our company would provide. And so, that led me to, just really going after it hard in 2016, 2017, getting really good at that. Well, within the company structure, the gentleman that started our company, his name is Art Leeser. He's been doing this now for about 20 years. So he's very, very successful. He's multimillionaire, got a lot of integrity, and I connected really well with him. That's why I really wanted to move forward with this company. So within the structure, he allows for kind of like real estate, kind of like a Keller Williams type of setup, or where you can basically own your own franchise and build out your own company and hire on other, agents. So that's what I did. I saw the opportunity to not just go out and be a really good salesperson or consultant, but I saw the opportunity to do what I love doing, which is connecting with people and providing opportunity for others. I had a guy ask me the other day, why did you build a team? Why? I said, this is just in me. I can't not do. If I have that chance, I made disciples for years, and now I'm in the business world. I've got to replicate myself. It just is what it is, So I started building that out, and man, it's been awesome. We're 3.5 years into it. And, that first year was a grind, and, we had to push through a lot of struggle. And it was like working 2 full-time jobs, because I was recruiting nonstop and I was selling nonstop, driving all over North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, working with my clients to sell. And then on the phone in between those appointments, when I got home, to my wife, often I was on the phone recruiting and training other agents how to sell and do what I was doing. And man, I did that for 2 years, and my wife was a champ putting up with me, but it got us to where we are today, where I'm able to be out of the field. I'm consistently working from my phone, I've got about 40, 45 agents that work with me. Probably 30 to 5 of them are consistent, working, and that's built out a annualized premium per month is about $350,000 within our team. What that means is that it's about 350 policies that my team is selling per month. So as I work with my team and build out the structure and train them, it's all remote, because they're all over the nation. So I take calls throughout the day. I train my other agent mentors and agent managers to do the same thing I do, so I don't have to take calls from all 45 of them. But I'm on the phone, throughout the day, recruiting, because we're growing right now, and training, most of the day. But that has led to, where I've worked from home most of the time. And at this point, I just hit a point where we just got into an office because got a 2-year-old at home. She is getting to that point where she's getting louder and hollering more often. So I just got an office space, but all that leads to the answer of your question. My day-to-day has mostly been, working from my phone, from my home, in the middle of, also doing the other things that I'm passionate about, which is I love writing. I love blogging. I just kicked my blog off again just this last, month or 2 ago. But I'm an avid Facebook user, and I'm an avid social media user. I think you can't have too much content out there, and so I love putting content out. Whatever is in my heart, whatever I'm passionate about at the time. So whether that's inspiration, whether that's religion, whether that's politics, I'm going to talk about what I'm thinking about. So back to you, Aaron. I just took up all the rest of the show right there.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. That's I think you touched on a few different things that open up the first C of the podcast for communication. And it's funny how we have life experience that kind of runs parallel in a way, and it just only makes sense that we got connected, way back when at a church. I grew up in a church and cut my teeth on public speaking and trying different things out and expressing myself in a creative way through the lens of church. And that's why I think it's just a beautiful thing for any family, and it's a very unique thing that I think is taken for granted for anybody who is outside of it, because it can be such a formative experience for young people and for older, just to try new things in a safe, trusting environment, in a constructive way. Also, car sales. I've got some car sales experience, and said, oh yeah. So that's where I learned also how to sell. So I want to touch on those two things real quick, and through the lens of communication, because I think for me personally, they were foundational in crafting how I communicate with people and using it in a way that could not only further my personal career or my personal life, but also, it helped me understand how I could perhaps best help others. So, from the church perspective, that I've actually been asked, like, if this is a Christian podcast, and as far as I know, the podcast has not been saved. I just happen to know a lot of people.
I'm trying to get it saved right now. Let's
get it saved.
I'm actually doing a secret mission journey into your podcast to save the whole thing.
But I only say that because there's going to be some people who are not believers, but I just want to encourage, if you are that person, to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's so much value and knowledge and wisdom and so much that you can learn from a religious life. So just real quick, I want to ask, like, when you were learning throughout the church and growing throughout the church, and starting preaching, like, how did that shape how you communicate one-on-one, or one on a few, if you're like leading small groups, and then one to a congregation? What are some things that you say, okay, I learned, this, that, and the other thing, that you could perhaps impart on somebody else, that, if they're in the church or not,
Yeah.
could possibly apply?
Yeah, man. It's funny because I'm actually, I'm trying to work on so many things at the same time. I'm sure you go through this too, where you have so many different ideas and projects. So I told my wife the other day, I'm like, I got to put out a second edition of my book, Chatting with 100. And it's all about public speaking and making that like taking public speaking and learning to communicate with 100 the same way you communicate effectively with one or two people. So anyway, that's a shameless plug for my book, Chatting with 100. You can get it on Amazon, but it's all about communication and telling your story. And that's what, I love the way you said it about in the church world. And this is not the case in every church, because there's so many denominations, so many different places, and all the different factors of who the pastor is and what the leadership's like. And some people have horror stories from church, and some people have incredible stories. So it's just like a church, in a sense, is just like any other place where whoever's in leadership is going to oftentimes impact your view of that place, that corporation, or that church. But thankfully for me, I had really great parents, first of all, but I had great youth pastors growing up in every situation I'd ever been in. And specifically when I had my experience of really what I'd say was my conversion experience, or meeting the Lord experience, at age 15, I wasn't in a church. I wasn't, it was just really in my bedroom. I had just a real, like, I can't explain it, but it was a very impacting moment where I felt like God was just trying to wake me up and say, hey man, I want to use your life for something greater. And, I was a popular kid. I was in 10th grade. I was playing football. I was with all the popular kids. I could party with the seniors if I wanted to. And, I just remember like, what am I doing? And feeling that void of, I am built for something so much greater than wasting my time just like, just partying and doing nothing, you know what I mean? Just kind of aimlessly living. And that experience at 15 years old just like shaped my world so dramatically. And I got very focused on the future and on my eternal destiny, my eternal purpose, and which in a sense, it's not just about like heaven or hell necessarily, but just that when you get a perspective of God having a purpose for your life, having a destiny for your life, it's going to change the way you live today. And it's going to change the way that it should change everything about the way that you live. And during that time, I had people that I was connected with. They saw that radical change in me, and like youth pastors that I even go to their church, got wind of it and were like, hey, we want you to speak at this youth rally or this thing. And so I didn't, I was just like, okay. So I just started speaking and preaching. And in the church that I was at, they would let me preach on Sunday morning every now and then, or share something. And so it gave me a lot of room to fail forward, I guess, because you're not always a perfect speaker when you're a kid, but you're just passionate about something. And I would say this about the idea of communicating. It's like, you got to find your message. Don't be a copy of anybody. It doesn't matter. Like, I remember the first time I preached and it felt so powerful. This was probably the second or third time, but it was, I was just thinking about it the other day actually, and how it felt like an out of body experience. It genuinely did, Aaron. I felt like when I look back, I think I was 16 and I was preaching, and it was this outdoor event with 250 kids or something out there. And when I remember that night when I went home, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I couldn't even remember seeing what I saw. All I could remember was seeing myself from an outside in. I was sharing so passionately about what had happened to my life and what I felt like they needed to hear. And so again, for the listeners, this isn't about like that you need to be a religious person or something like that, but it's about when you have a message, when you have something that matters to you, then you don't have to form your life after anybody else. You'll have something to say. You'll have a way to impact without having to copy somebody else. And I think that's one of the most important things, Aaron, like because even in every season of life, I had to revisit that just a few years ago and go, well, who am I now? And it was about like finding my message again, because it's not just about like a one-time experience, but what's my message? Who am I? What am I passionate about in the context of all these new things that God has brought into my life? And so I think that is most important, is know your story and know your message. And if you don't feel like you have one yet, give it time and be patient, and let that, sometimes you're right in the middle of writing your story or your book. Your life right now is the message that you'll be speaking in 5 years or 10 years. The struggle you're going through now and the way you do or don't overcome it will or will not be your message down the road based on how you respond. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love what you're saying about how, because we live in a noisy world, and, on average, people are connected to, hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people, and let those voices inside themselves through social media. We're bombarded by messaging that we voluntarily let inside of our lives. And it can be, and I'm speaking from experience, it can be so distracting to the message that we actually have internal that we want to get out, because we're so busy trying to process all the information from other people. So
Right.
it's great advice that you're giving, that like people should, try and quiet out the noise and understand, hey, what is my unique set of life experience, and how has that set me up to communicate to somebody else? I love that. We've got I've got a lot of different questions. We can go a lot of different paths, but I do want, just before we transition into kind of the community aspect, I want to ask you about, because you're a multidisciplined communicator, in that you've got the kind of the religious and Christian background that you can communicate with strength, but you've also, over the past few years, you've also got the business acumen, but over the past few years, you've kind of evolved into and grown into the more political sphere. And that is a minefield in a lot of different ways. So I want to touch on that a little bit. I'm about to throw, speaking of people that know their message and are unabashed, not shy about communicating it, I want to throw some names out there that are definitely bombs that can just ignite a room, something that you probably don't want to bring up at Thanksgiving or Christmas. That's where, when we're recording this around the holidays. But like, I have in my notes here, and this is just a funny line to me, which is Kanye, Trump, communication styles, and perception versus reality, which is like, that's a whole hour of a podcast probably.
Yeah.
But the reason I framed it that way is because, I don't know if it was earlier this year or what have you, I actually recorded a podcast that says, like, in America, everything is possible. And I recorded that after Kanye met with Trump in the Oval Office. And it was just such a meeting of,
it's wild. Yeah.
It was just the wildest thing. Like, anything can happen in America. Like, it is just like, it is an unprecedented moment that it just throws everything upside down and inside out from what we think should be happening. And even if that's our perception, the reality is those two dudes are in the White House talking to each other about something, right? And as time has gone on, obviously Kanye has the ear of Trump. And I'm not trying to make this all about their relationship, but I want to frame, I just want to serve up the political conversation through the lens of these two very polarizing figures. One, both from pop culture, but one's, very, very much pop culture. And then the other, Trump has really moved into the business and political sphere. And the reason I want to kind of frame it up this way is because they've both had these like mega transitions in their careers of like, Trump from business to politics, and then Kanye now from pop culture to religion. So I know I'm kind of opening up a huge can of worms here, but through the lens of communication, I just want to get your opinion on the chaos that is politics, with Trump, maybe a little, sprinkle of Kanye in there. And then I want to hear from you, why you felt pulled to communicating more about politics. Because earlier you had talked about how like, hey, sometimes you just kind of want to be quiet and step back for a second because I don't know. And there's so much information about and going through politics that it's a dangerous thing to talk about politics now. You can just like totally tank your own career and everything if you're talking about it. So given all that, what you got to talk about?
Oh, man. Well, we know one thing is for sure, and everybody agrees on it. That Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
That's very true.
We know that for sure. But it's, that like tongue in cheek, totally kidding, halfway serious about that though. But it's like that alone, that reality alone, it like, I started studying that kind of stuff, honestly, probably, I don't know, 2007, started just like trying to like figure out what was going behind the mirrors, the smoke and mirrors. And like the term conspiracy theorist, it's like the easiest cop out for a non-thinker. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, well, you called me a conspiracy theorist. Well, you must be so sharp. You listen to Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, and you decide between those which perspective of that issue is correct. When the fact is that all three of those and all of those places and those sources are not talking about what's actually going on, and it's just smoke and mirrors to keep you numb and distracted and a slave. That's the fact of the matter. You know what I mean? And because if we can't be thinkers, if we're not, that's why I love the internet. I love the internet. I love the freedom that is on the internet. Although it's being, who knows how long that'll last, but I love the freedom that's on the internet because it allows for independent journalists who are very, very gifted, to independently research. I think it's the funniest phrase when people say, oh, did you learn that from Google? And I'm like, no, I actually learned it from DuckDuckGo because I don't want Google tracking me. No, but really, I'm like, that's just a silly phrase because it's another cop out. It's almost like saying like Google and DuckDuckGo and all these things, they're like the current library. You know what I mean? Totally. Like you can literally go and source everything. And it's the same way if you go to a library, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to read this book, but then I'm going to figure out and make sure that the source of this book is credible. And maybe it's a biased source. And then I need, as a smart human being that's an individual thinker, I need to decide what to think about that. And then I need to cross-reference with a different opinion. That's what happens when you go to a library in the 1950s, right? Like you have to read for yourself. And no one would ever say, oh, did you learn that from the library? As a cut down. You know what I mean? It's right. Like literally open source information on the internet. Oh, you learned that from the internet? Oh, you must be, oh no, you didn't get that from the six main news sources that are owned by, or the main news sources that are owned by, a few corporations that are owned by possibly just a few families that are making money off of brainwashing you. You know what I mean? Like it's just silly to me. So back to your question, why did I speak up? Because it like when I started seeing, I went through a really interesting political evolution over the years with, you guys can read my blog on my site because I got a very, I talk about all this in a little bit more detail. But my growing up in Texas, growing up in a right-wing family, when I say right wing, I just mean conservative, Republican, voted red line across the board. moved to Kansas City in 2008, had a friendship with a pastor there that really influenced my political thinking at the time. He was actually from Amsterdam or Rotterdam, and so he moved to the United States, and he was a black guy, and he moved to the United States, and he went through the course to become an American citizen. You know, he had to go through that whole process of becoming a citizen. So he'd tell me, he's like, Blaise, I'm probably more of a citizen than you are. I probably know more about the Constitution than you do. And I had a little pocket Constitution, by the way. But he was like, the dude was he just knew his stuff, and he was proud to be an American because of what he had studied and in order to become that American citizen. And he understood the power of being an American citizen in this world, and the value of it, or the benefit of it. It doesn't make you greater than anybody else. It's just currently in this time of history, it's a great opportunity. That's one reason why there's an immigration problem coming to America, because people want to come here, right? It's a good country. So I find it hilarious when you have people saying, like, you know, they're going to move to Canada because of Donald Trump, but they didn't ever do it, you know, or that they got to leave the country because it's so bad, or it's so bad over. It's like, give me a break. The reason why we have a crisis is one reason is because it's such a land of opportunity. Now, we're not perfect by any means, but anyway, I found through those conversations with that person and some other things, I lived in downtown Kansas City in the ghetto for a while, where you hear gunshots outside the door, not right outside my door, but like right down the street. You know, I worked at a program called the Justice Program, you know, doing outreach and stuff like that. And it was an interesting season of life, and it really challenged me, you know, to think outside the box and not be so stuck in my political ideas of just what I had grown up with, and not just be stuck without asking the questions. You know what I mean? So that was very formative in my time. But yeah, man, I think I can't answer the question without, you know, obviously telling you about my backstory and these type of things. And then moved to Asheville, North Carolina in 2015. After my wife and I got married, she started an Instagram account that grew to like 25,000 people. And we started hosting events, and Asheville's a very liberal city. I mean, very liberal. It's like the Portland of the East. That's the way it's thought of. So, you know, for a right-wing Christian kid that grew up a certain way, to going to Kansas City, meeting this gentleman, and having my thoughts kind of like molded a little differently, then to moving to Asheville and being around everybody was a Bernie supporter. Until of course Bernie bowed down to Hillary, then they all became Hillary supporters. But everybody was that side of the thing, and so I was wide open to becoming that side of the aisle. I just had told myself in my life, on many issues, theological issues, political issues, on many things, I was like, I am going to be open. And because at the end of the day, it's not important what you think, it's important what's true, right? It's not, that's what's really important. And so I had many great conversations with friends out there, or now former friends, because I got some nasty messages now from those people, but I had great conversations with former friends who I would have loved to continue to be friends with out there at the time. You know, political conversations, just thinking through different issues. And that's what life's about. You know, we got to have these conversations. Like, that's why it's just crazy to me when people aren't open to talking through things, you know. Instead, you just throw out like, you're a racist or you're a Nazi or something like that, as though that's an argument. Yeah, you got to talk through issues and why we think what we think, because everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a reason why they're thinking what they're thinking. So, you know, lead up to 2016 at the time of the election, man, there was just so much going on with Bernie and Trump. And I was actually wavering in my thoughts between the two of them. But when I saw what happened with, you know, this is a whole other can of worms, which we don't have time to go into. But when I saw what happened with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and Seth Rich and that whole situation, which is a lot for people to research if they want to, man, I just realized, like, okay, Bernie just got the whole entire election stolen from him, and he's pretty much okay with it. The woman he was bashing the entire time, as a neocon. Now he's telling all his young millennials to support her. And I mean, and I wasn't a big Bernie bro at the time, so I didn't go crazy or anything, but I saw people like go nuts. They got so pissed. They were just like, burn this whole thing down. Screw it. What's the point, you know? But as I watched the whole thing and then I was listening to Trump, I was like, I think this guy has what it takes to lead this nation where we need to go. And there was a resonance on what he said. And he obviously is not perfect by any means. You know, he doesn't have a perfect history. But what I will say is, as I've researched him, even during that time, I was like, the dude's been saying the same stuff for like 30 years. Like actually consistent in his messaging for like 30 years. Back when he was on late night shows in the 80s, I mean, saying these same type of things. And so he's always been the same dude, and he does not care at all what the media thinks about him. He never has. I loved watching one of the interviews back in, I think it was like early 2000s, where he just talked, the guy from CNN, he was like, this interview's over, dude. Like, he took off his thing and just walked out. And I mean, he had the same mindset toward the brainwashing of the media at that time as he still has now. And, you know, I think the left is waking up to it as well. You know, a lot of people on the left are waking up to it too, that like, you know, the media is not like, it's not on our team. When you have ABC, you know, James O'Keefe pulled out that video of the ABC news anchor saying, yeah, I had the story on Jeffrey Epstein 3 years ago and they wouldn't let me put it out. And then that goes out and the whole world sees that video. And then she backtracks. Well, no, I was just expressing frustration. It's like, no, you just want your paycheck. You just want to stay in the millions of dollars, because all these people, and I'll end with this, Aaron, pass it back to you. But all these media corporation people, they are the elite. They sit up there and talk like talking heads, but dude, they're paid so much money to just sit up there and talk, and they don't necessarily get to all give their opinion. They are controlled, as you heard, even from like the CNN, the James O'Keefe Project Veritas thing, where he came out with that audio from Jeff Zucker from the CNN conference calls, where he told them what they have to focus on. It's like, it doesn't matter what you think. You have to say, because these are all corporations. That's why I love podcasts. That's why I love the internet. That's why I love left-wing independent journalists, right-wing independent journalists, libertarian independent journalists, like people that are allowed to say and think what they want. And yeah, I want them to make money. I hope we need to support independent journalists, but they're not just sitting up there as corporations controlled based on a paycheck, but they actually are doing the research and they're fighting for it. And man, that's, you know, I didn't really get into Kanye there, but that's why I started to see the lens of Trump. And Kanye is a whole different story. So
it is, but I like what you're saying, and I agree. I think the kind of common thread that we're talking about too is it's the necessity for people to take ownership of their own media diet, as well as their own voice, and understand that you and I, even though you and I and anybody listening has the ability to do the research and understand what's going on to a greater degree than just getting fed the headline. And now that we do have that opportunity, I think people have the responsibility to read past the headline. You can take it at face value, but always only take it at face value until you have a better understanding of the facts, because otherwise you are letting somebody else's opinion become your own. And that could be a really dangerous place to be, especially if you care. Like you said, what really matters is the truth. And, you know, it's difficult, you know, because we don't always have the facts, and it's, you know, you want to put trust in, you know, these bigger voices that might have more resources than we do. But it's becoming more and more apparent that, you know, everybody's human and everybody's flawed and everybody's subject to getting influenced by, you know, some other realm of power. And it's really important that people, just one second. It's really important that people understand the power that they have in their own voice, And even in the face of the mob, I suppose is what you're saying, is what I'm saying, is like, even in the face of the mob and you know, a lot of pushback, it's important that we own what we believe in. And kind of, if we're going to do the callback to Kanye, you know, the free thought, like he kept saying, you know, I'm about free thought and just, independent thinking and owning my own opinion. And, you know, there's a lot of people taking it a lot of different ways, but that's kind of the tie-in of like, hey, I put on that hat and I know that I can just share my own piece. But what were you going to add on to that?
No. This is great stuff, man. You had said something that just, it triggered a thought in me. Like when you talked about, you know, how we want to trust those with more resources. Like you look at like a ABC or an NBC or a CNN or a Fox or whatever, it's like, of course we should trust them because they've got so much money and opportunity to do the research or even fly somebody over to do the research. Or it's like, it seems like those would be the people that be able to get down to the truth. But then, you know, one of the funniest videos I ever saw, and I did a video on this on my YouTube channel, was, I mean, it's funny, it's not funny, it's sad, but it's like the situation in Syria where they supposedly showed a bombing in Syria of the Kurds and the Syrians, and it came out that video was pulled from YouTube off of a Kentucky gun range. And like, Aaron, I was literally just mind blown because I don't want to just be like in the spirit of what you're saying of like finding our own voice. Even like the red pill movement or the conservative movement can quickly become just a parroting movement of Trump and be like, oh, the fake news or something like that, and just say what Trump says or say what Charlie Kirk says, or you know what I mean? And it's like, but when I watched that, I was just like, well, I'm going to use my own brain here. ABC has millions of dollars. Like somebody just threw this together and was like, oh, well, that looks really bad. How can we make how can we make the American public see a violent situation and look really bad and then cry out for us to go to war or something or be mad? Oh, we'll take this from a Kentucky gun range and say it's from Syria. So not to belabor that, but just, it's wild to me, man. It's totally wild to me. With Kanye, when I saw Kanye do the whole MAGA hat thing, I was definitely like, man, that dude's got guts, you know? Because everybody calls him crazy all the time, you know. It's like, and you know, he even talks about his own mental breakdown stuff that he had. But I was watching that happen, and I was just like, man, that is a powerful statement. And then, of course, you know, leading to the point where he, you know, made his commitment to Christ and put out Jesus as King. And I see even in the people that I agree with on most things, I see all kinds of opinions about that. Some people are like, oh yeah, he's just faking it to make money. Look, he's like selling $25 socks with Jesus as King on them. Like, there's no way he's a Christian, you know? And I'm just like, I don't really care. Like, I'll buy the socks. Like, he's actually saying things that some Christians are afraid to say. Like, he's more bold than most Christians are. So, but, you know, he's definitely a picture of somebody that has been finding and has found. You know, what's the blogger that I can't remember his name, but he talks about when you're finding your voice. You know, some people are afraid to share their message while they're still learning their message. And it's kind of like the journey of the Lord of the Rings. You've got Frodo who's figuring this thing out as he's going. And it's okay to share your journey while you're going, because that's going to help some people, as long as you're honest that you're still figuring it out. You know, you're talking like a novice, but you're on the journey. Then you got like the Aragorn, the king that's halfway there, and he's a little further down the road. And sometimes you've got more of it. And then you're like the Gandalf, who's the expert or whatever. So I think we all are on these different levels of these journeys in different topics. You know, I can't come out and talk as a businessman and be like, act like I've got everything down. I've only been doing, you know, outside of the church world business like 4 years now. And so, but I mean, I'm doing a heck of a job at it, but I'm still like I will always admit in this time, like I am on the path. I am following a mentor lockstep right now. And I'll say all of my success is based on me following that mentor. When it comes to religion and spirituality and those things, I could talk like an expert for hours, but, anyway, I don't know if that's off topic, but just some things
No, that's great. I think that's a great summary point, in that, like, you have to know who you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, where you have holes, and but ultimately where you have expertise, speak with confidence. And if even if you're like, hey, I don't know all the facts, but there's something awry here, and I think everybody should take a second look, or something like that, we should always just feel confident and know that it's okay to share when you don't know, as long as you're honest about it. I like what you're saying. We're running shorter on time,
yeah,
so I want to transition real quick to community, and we'll kick off this. And I'm not like real strict on these pillars or what have you, because I feel that the listener, if you're really keenly listening throughout our conversation, a conversation like this, you can pick up different themes of strong communication, community building, throughout it implicitly. So like, I love giving the practical point, but I think you just dropped some excellent gems through just us navigating through this conversation of how someone can take these points of what these examples of strong communicators, even if they're polarizing. I think there's gems that can be taken and internalized and expressed through anybody's work in life. So, but to transition into community, there's two things I want to ask you about. First is the village question, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the village question. It's a recurring question that I have on StrongCom podcast, and it goes like this. Real curious about your thoughts on this. So the village question is pretty simple. It's just imagine you're building a village, okay, akin to Kanye going to Wyoming, maybe, but imaginary village. You're building a village, and there's no people in it, but you want to get some people together. But it's up to you to bring those people that you want to be around to make a healthy community. So you have 4 signs, facing, 4 different directions that you can place one value or principle on each sign. So to attract the people that you want to be around to your village. So I want to ask, what 4 values or principles would you put on those signs to attract people that you want in your village?
Man, that's huge. That's a great question. I like that. I'm trying to think of the words that would best describe the things I'm thinking. And these aren't in any like order of importance, but I'd say the first word that comes to mind is faith. And when I say faith, I don't necessarily mean like a specific creed to or religion, but faith, the belief, high belief level. There's a feeling that you get when you're around somebody that believes in themselves, that believes in their potential. And because when you believe in your potential, you can believe in other people's potential, right?
Yes.
When you don't believe in yourself, then like, that's why leaders that's like leaders that are good leaders will learn to quickly take people with them, and take people to the next level. There's a difference between like a leader who inspires and a manager who just kind of like passes out duties and helps you clock in and clock out and gives you a paycheck. But I think faith is the number one thing. And I said no order of importance, but that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind. So just a high belief level, and within faith is positivity. That's like that's one way that I would define faith, I think, is just positive expectation of good things to come, continued, persevered, positive expectation of good things to come, even in the face of failure. because if you're going to build a village, or you're going to create a home or a place for people to reside, you're bound to run into problems, and you're bound to run into obstacles. And I think, having that persevering positivity that I would call faith is the thing that can get you through anything. It doesn't matter how bad your life gets. If you're still breathing, then we got a shot, right? Everything's okay. Oh, well, I'm broke. I'm all this. I'm in prison. I'm this. Like, okay, are you alive? We got a shot, right? So I think that's the number one thing. And then probably the second thing would be, I'm going to wrap these two words in one, but compassion or love and compassion. I think that would be the second thing that I'd put in there. And that's important to me. And, some people, like, even with my sharing my political thoughts and my political bent, and I had the most intense conversation with a former friend from 2015 that was just so mad at me, but he just hell bent on being in this certain mindset that he couldn't hear anything I was saying outside of it. And he said, "You're spreading hate." Mm-hmm. And I just thought, wow, this is that is the highest insult you could give to me. And it's fine, because at the end of the day, what matters about you is that you know who you are, regardless of what anybody else says to you. But I would say at the end of the day, at the core value of my entire life is love and compassion. And I think that would be the most, another very, very important thing that I would put in there, because in love and compassion doesn't always look like the exact same thing in every situation. But I think that it's, for me personally, that's having a sensitivity. And this is what it means to me, having a sensitivity to the heart of God, the heart of the Father, that cares for every single person, and knows how to love and serve each person in the place that they're at. And having a sensitivity outside of my thought process boundaries to even break my thought process or my beliefs if it requires to act in more love. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
like sometimes our beliefs will hinder us stepping out in love. So love would be the second thing. Like I told you before we started talking, I talked for a long time on each thing you asked me. So I got faith and I got love and compassion. Two more. Oh man. I think I would say, and it's hard to put this one in a word, but the word is elders. That's the word that comes to me, elders. Like, and I don't necessarily mean old people, but older people, elders. I think the fathers and the mothers are very, like, okay, so this is funny, but okay, boomer, right? This whole thing that's going on right now, like, and probably people listening to me, if they're like in their 20s, and like, whatever, dude, you're okay, boomer, but I just turned 37 last week, so I'm feeling it. But for real though, I mean, I feel so young in heart and spirit, but I see, like, I value my dad more than anything right now, because I have a daughter. And I'm just like, did my dad look at me this way, the way I look at her? Yeah. Did my mom look at me this way, the way I look at her? Like it's just mind blowing. And I'm like, I can't believe I put them through some of the stuff I put them through, and I was a pretty good kid, but I'm just like, man, I think, like, we need that next generation, and they need us too, because they don't know how to use their iPhones.
Right. Right.
No, but they need us too. They need our perspective too. And maturity doesn't necessarily come in years all the time. It comes in teachability through experiences. But there's way more experiences on that side when it comes to the next generation. So I would not want a village without the elders. And that doesn't mean that I have to be an elder. So the last thing would be joy, man. Just good entertainment, joy, music, like happiness, fun. So those would be the four.
I love that, man. Thank you. I love those. I'm having a lot of fun with this question, because every single time it's like four completely different answers, and it's just like, It's just so interesting to hear. So I really appreciate that. Those are awesome. Those are awesome. So transitioning into the company piece and working on a business, you work remote, you do a lot of, but you're leading a huge team, like you said before. So what is community building like for somebody who works remote most of the time? You probably haven't met a lot of your agents face to face. How do you keep them fired up as if you're all in the same building working on that same mission? How do you keep people like rolling even if they have a setback?
Yeah, man. Great question. So it's cool the way our business is structured. I've got there's three SVPs or senior vice presidents, and they're all at the 300,000 or above mark, which is that premium mark I talked about earlier. But there's a gentleman named Aaron, and he's above me, and he's been in the business for 10 years. He's incredible at what he does, and he's he's one of my rocks for sure that helped me get where I'm at. There's another gentleman named Nick who works alongside of us. And then there's me, and I came up underneath Aaron as another SVP. So within my company, I've got, 40, 45, but we're all under the umbrella of Aaron's group. And Aaron has probably, I'd say 90 or so. I'm about half of his group and half of his volume. And so I've watched the way he led, and this would be kind of on the point earlier about the elders. Aaron's my age, but he's been doing this a long time. So I just watched a lot of his tendencies and his strengths of how he communicated. There's a book called Fierce Conversations I want to recommend. I can't even remember who wrote it now, but Fierce Conversations, because in this business, we're all 1099. You know what I mean? We've got some big hitters, like people that are making multiple six figures. They haven't even built their own teams. They're just out there crushing it. And then you got people that struggle just to get by, but there's ups and downs for everybody. And learning to have those fierce conversations was huge for me, because to me, that just means you're willing to tell people the truth. Because if you coddle people, then you're just helping them on their way out. You know what I mean? When they're going through their rough time, if you just agree with everything they say and try to make them feel good, then it's like you're just helping them go broke and not win. But you got, especially in a sales community, because we really are like a family in a lot of ways. I'd say some practical tools would be, just group texting. And when I say group texting, I don't mean everybody, like the 40 people can all text back and forth. It's me as the leader has a texting app that I can text everybody at the same time. And if they respond, it just comes to me. So that's important to the messaging. It's got to be consistent messaging. I try to send something out every day, but I'd say probably at least 3 or 4 times a week in the morning, because I start my day early and I try to get myself inspired. I listen to something encouraging or read something encouraging. I journal every single morning, every single morning I'm journaling something about my goals, about life, or whatever's going on. And then I'll type up something to my team and I'll shoot it out 9 a.m. Eastern, which is 8 a.m. Central. And I'll just make sure it hits everybody. And that's just a very simple thing that I do. We've got team conference calls that we do every single week. So we just encourage everybody to plug in, and we're always messaging to people. And then those one-on-one calls are huge, just reaching out. Hey, how's it going? I noticed I hadn't heard from you in a few days. How are things going? Or I hadn't seen anything from you in the last week or two. How's things going? So I think just letting people know that we're here, know that we care. I think that's probably the biggest way that I've helped create that community within my team.
Love that. And yeah, that's a big, that's kind of the core of the idea of strong comm. This idea that I had of communication. We need to have the skills to where we can go one to many, but we also have to have the empathy and understanding and shared values and sense of mission to go one-on-one and really be able to relate to build that community.
Yeah.
And it's
takes patience, man. It takes time. That one-on-one, it's a whole different level. It's easy to send out a mass text. It's easy to say really awesome and positive, encouraging things. It's hard to stay on the phone for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour at 10 p.m. when someone's going through it. It's harder. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. But that's where the winners, that's where the opportunity is. That's exactly because it's hard. That's where the value lies. So, man, what do you got in your sights for 2020?
2020. 2020, man. So I hit a point probably in the last year or the last 6 months where I just, self-evaluation is big. You got to self-evaluate, and you never want to beat yourself up, but you always want to be honest with yourself. So, I like from 2016 where I was, I love Facebook memories because they just pop up and they remind you what was going on a few years ago. And I had all these Hill quotes from Think and Grow Rich in 2016. And we were so broke and just struggling to get by, scraping by. And I had just gotten in the sales business, and I was going to go out and figure this thing out. And lo and behold, I figured it out. But it's easy to get comfortable. It's easy to get comfortable and to just like hit a certain place and go, okay, we're like here, but there's so much more, and it's like, I'm not satisfied. I'm not content. I'm not content, I guess, or I'm happy, but discontent. You know what I mean? And so because I know my potential. And so for 2020, I'm going all in on my business at another level. I just got in a 12-month lease in a new office space, and that's going to help me with an extra level of focus for recruiting. I'm going to double. I got 40 agents now. We need to be at 80 to 100, within the next year. And I'm going all in on my business. Now, insurance, I love it because it serves people. I love it mainly, though. What I love about what I do is that I help other people go out and serve people, and it changes their lives. I love hiring people, and then all of a sudden they get good at it, and they start having fun, and they start making good money that they've never made before, and their lives are changed. That's one of the most enjoyable things to me about what I do. Now, my other passions, which I would say are my driving passions outside of my family, would be influencing the world, man. I want to impact to a whole nother level. I want to, I just want to impact. I'm going to be looking at, doing more speaking and things like that. And, so somehow while I'm doing all the stuff I'm doing with my business, I'm believing for new opportunities to arise for doing some traveling and some speaking and things like that. So that's where I'm headed, man. I'm going to write another book this year. I probably two, actually. I've got 2 books in my mind right now, and I'm going to try to get those out this year, and just going to be blogging and putting out videos consistently. I've got a new video series called Wake Up and Win that I'm doing pretty consistently now on YouTube. So got a lot there, man.
Yeah. No shortage of things to work on, but I think that's what we're here to do. I think, is to find and live out the purpose that, we were brought here for. So, man, I really appreciate you being a guest. And, man, if there's anything I can do to help you further your mission in 2020 and beyond, just let me know. I think a lot of people
Same with you, bro. Same with you.
I think a lot of people can get value out of this. Follow Blaise on Twitter and YouTube, and sign up for his newsletter. And he's pretty much everywhere. So
BlaiseForet.com. Get on BlaiseForet.com. You can find everything there. So
awesome, man. Sweet, man. Well, appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, cool.